My name is Chloe, and I'm 32 years old. As a medical researcher, I thought the biggest challenge of my career would be finding cures, not fighting betrayal from my own sister. The silence in that hospital room was deafening as my mother screamed those words at me. Olivia needed bone marrow, and I was the only match. The same Olivia who had deliberately sabotaged my research project and destroyed my reputation 6 months earlier. Would you sacrifice yourself for someone who ruined everything you worked for? Before I tell you how I revealed the truth that changed everything, let me know where you are watching from and hit subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this one. Growing up in our suburban Boston home, I always felt like an outsider in my own family. Our house was a classic New England colonial, with the perfect white picket fence and manicured lawn that my father tended to every Sunday without fail. From the outside, we looked like the ideal middle-class American family. But within those walls, I lived in the constant shadow of my sister, Olivia. Olivia was 3 years older, with the same dark blonde hair and blue eyes as our parents. She had our mother's smile and our father's confident posture. I, on the other hand, had curly auburn hair, green eyes, and a quieter demeanor that made me stand out like a mismatched puzzle piece in our family photos. The differences went beyond appearances. Every milestone, every achievement of mine seemed to pale in comparison to Olivia's. On my 8th birthday, I received a modest celebration with a homemade cake. A month later, Olivia's 11th birthday featured a professionally catered party with a hired magician and personalized gift bags for every guest. My parents explained that Olivia was more social and needed these experiences for her development. When I brought home straight A's in 4th grade, my report card was briefly acknowledged with a nod and a good job, before being tucked away in a drawer. When Olivia managed to raise her C average to B's that same year, our parents took her out for a special dinner and bought her a new bicycle as a reward for her remarkable improvement. Christmas mornings followed the same pattern. Olivia would unwrap mountains of presents while I received practical items, like clothes and books. One particular Christmas when I was 10, I unwrapped a second-hand microscope, while Olivia received a brand new computer. When I expressed disappointment, my mother pulled me aside and whispered, "Don't be ungrateful. We spend the same amount on both of you. Your things just cost less." Olivia quickly learned to use this favoritism to her advantage. She mastered the art of framing me whenever something went wrong in our house. A broken vase, missing cookies, a stain on the carpet, all somehow became my fault, even when I was nowhere near the scene of the crime. And my parents always believed her, without question. The incident with the dress stands out most painfully in my memory. When I was 8, my mother bought Olivia a beautiful new dress for a cousin's wedding. The night before the event, Olivia cut small holes in the seams because she had decided she wanted to wear a different outfit. The next morning, she tearfully showed our parents the damaged dress and claimed she had seen me playing with scissors near her closet the previous day. Despite my tearful denials, I was grounded for 2 weeks. No amount of pleading could convince my parents that I was innocent. Olivia watched with a satisfied smirk as I was sent to my room in disgrace. That night, I heard her laughing with our mother downstairs while they picked out an even prettier replacement dress. These experiences shaped me. I learned to be fiercely independent, to seek validation through academic achievements rather than parental approval. I buried myself in science, books, and nature documentaries, while Olivia pursued popularity and social status. By the time I reached high school, we lived in parallel universes within the same household. The only person who seemed to see me for who I was my grandmother, my mother's mother. During summer visits to her home in Vermont, I found a brief respite from the constant comparisons. She treated Olivia and me equally, and sometimes I caught her watching me with a thoughtful expression. "You have your own light, Chloe," she told me once while we were baking cookies. "Different from the rest of the family, but special all the same." Sometimes things aren't what they seem on the surface. I didn't understand what she meant then, but her words stayed with me. A cryptic message I would only decipher years later. The first sign that something was truly different about my place in the family came when I was 14. Working on a school project about family heritage, I searched through our family photo albums for baby pictures. I found plenty of Olivia as an infant, swaddled in hospital blankets, being held by beaming parents. But when I looked for my own newborn photos, there were none. The earliest pictures of me showed a baby who appeared to be about 6 months old, already sitting up and grabbing at toys. When I questioned my mother about this discrepancy, her reaction was unexpectedly defensive. "We were busier when you came along," she snapped, snatching the album from my hands. "We didn't have time to take as many photos. Stop looking for problems where there aren't any." When I pressed further, asking why there were no hospital photos like Olivia had, my mother's face flushed with anger. "You are the most ungrateful child. Do you know how many kids would love to have what you have? A roof over your head, food on the table, parents who provide for you, and all you can do is complain about baby pictures. This family has given you everything, Chloe. Everything." Her outburst seemed disproportionate to my simple question, but I learned to stop asking. Something didn't add up, but I was too young, too dependent to pursue the truth. Instead, I channeled my energy into planning my escape, counting down the days until I could leave for college and build a life where I wouldn't constantly feel like an afterthought. The day my acceptance letter arrived from Johns Hopkins School of Medicine was the day my real life began. Not only had I been accepted, but I had been awarded a full academic scholarship covering tuition, room, and board. My hands trembled as I read the letter 3 times to make sure it wasn't a mistake. This was my ticket to freedom, to a future where my accomplishments would stand on their own merit. I rushed to share the news with my parents, foolishly hoping this achievement might finally earn their enthusiasm. My mother was in the kitchen preparing dinner, while my father watched the evening news. "I got into Johns Hopkins," I announced, holding up the letter. "Full scholarship." My father glanced up briefly. "That's in Baltimore, right?" "Pretty far away." My mother frowned. "Medical school? That's going to be very difficult, Chloe. Are you sure you're up for that kind of pressure?" Before I could respond, the front door burst open and Olivia swept in, dropping shopping bags on the floor. "Mom, Dad, I have amazing news. My fashion design teacher says I have real talent. She thinks I should apply to Parsons School of Design in New York." Just like that, my moment was gone. My parents spent the rest of the evening discussing Olivia's potential fashion career, researching Parsons online, and celebrating with ice cream. My acceptance letter sat forgotten on the kitchen counter, eventually being used as a coaster for my father's coffee cup. That fall, I moved to Baltimore and threw myself into my studies with single-minded determination. Medical school was every bit as challenging as everyone said it would be. The volume of information we needed to absorb was staggering. I spent countless nights in the library, fueled by coffee and ambition, memorizing anatomical structures, biochemical pathways, and diagnostic criteria. While other students complained about the workload, I thrived on it. For the first time in my life, my hard work was recognized and rewarded on its own merits. No comparisons, no favoritism. Just the objective measure of my knowledge and skills. It was during my second year that I met Dr. Evelyn Reed, a brilliant hematologist who would become my mentor and the closest thing to a supportive parent I had ever known. I had stayed after her lecture on rare blood disorders to ask questions, and one question led to another until we realized we had been talking for over 2 hours. "You have a natural intuition for research, Chloe," she told me. "The way you connect seemingly unrelated pieces of information is rare, even among seasoned researchers." Under Dr. Reed's guidance, I discovered my passion for researching rare blood disorders. There was something profoundly satisfying about investigating diseases at the molecular level, searching for patterns and solutions that others had missed. I finished at the top of my class and published my first research paper before graduation, a case study on a rare form of anemia that earned recognition in several medical journals. After completing my residency, I was accepted into a prestigious fellowship program at the Johnson Institute for Hematological Research in Boston. I hesitated briefly at the thought of returning to the same city as my family, but the opportunity was too good to pass up. The institute was at the forefront of stem cell research, and I would have access to resources and technology that few other facilities could offer. My research focused on developing new therapies for treatment-resistant leukemia using modified stem cells. The work was groundbreaking, with the potential to save thousands of lives. I led a small team of dedicated researchers, working tirelessly to perfect our methodology. My closest colleague was Leo Gomez, a brilliant geneticist with a dry sense of humor, who became my best friend and confidant. Unlike most people who found me reserved and difficult to read, Leo saw through my protective shell to the passionate researcher beneath. "You know, Chloe," he said one evening as we analyzed data long after everyone else had gone home, "you're the most dedicated person I've ever met. But sometimes I wonder what you're trying to prove, and to whom." His observation struck closer to home than I cared to admit. Despite my professional success, part of me was still that little girl desperately seeking validation. The difference was that now I was earning it through genuine achievement, rather than begging for it from indifferent parents. By my third year at the Institute, our research was showing remarkable promise. We had developed a novel method of modifying stem cells to target specific cancer cells while leaving healthy tissue untouched. Dr. Peterson, the director of our department, called me into his office one Friday afternoon. "Chloe, the results from your latest trials are impressive," he said, sliding a folder across his desk. "The board is considering establishing a new research division focused specifically on personalized cellular therapies with a $2 million annual budget. They want you to head it up." I stared at him, momentarily speechless. This was everything I had worked for, a chance to expand my research and potentially develop treatments that could change the standard of care for blood cancers. "The official announcement won't be made for another month," Dr. Peterson continued. "But I wanted you to know that it's practically certain." "You've earned this, Chloe." As I walked back to my lab, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced before. This wasn't just professional success. It was vindication. I had found my place in the world, a community that valued my contributions and recognized my worth. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen. Little did I know that this moment represented the peak before a devastating fall, and that the architect of my undoing would be none other than the sister I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. The Monday morning that Olivia walked into my laboratory began like any other. I was reviewing data from our latest trial, completely absorbed in the promising results we were seeing in patients with aggressive lymphoma. The sound of high heels clicking against the tile floor barely registered until Leo cleared his throat. "Chloe, someone's here to see you." I looked up to see Olivia standing in the doorway, looking like she had just stepped off a fashion magazine cover. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, and her designer outfit probably cost more than my monthly rent. For a moment, I didn't recognize my own sister. "Surprise!" she said, spreading her arms wide. "Your big sis has come to visit." It had been 5 years since we had last spoken at our grandmother's funeral. We had exchanged tense pleasantries before going our separate ways. Now here she was, invading the one space I had carved out for myself, far from her shadow. "Olivia," I managed, setting down my papers. "This is unexpected. How did you find me?" She laughed, the same musical laugh that had always charmed our parents. "Mom told me you were working at some big-shot research place. I thought I'd surprise you. Can we do lunch? We have so much catching up to do." I glanced at Leo, who subtly nodded, encouraging me to go. Reluctantly, I agreed, grabbing my coat and following Olivia to an upscale restaurant nearby. Over an elaborate meal she insisted on ordering, Olivia shared her life story since we had last met. Her modeling career in New York had fizzled out after a few promising years. "The industry is so ageist," she complained. "Once you hit 28, they start looking for younger faces." She had married a wealthy financial analyst, only to divorce him 18 months later when she discovered he was having an affair with his assistant. Classic, right? Such a cliché. She rolled her eyes dramatically. Then she leaned forward, her expression suddenly serious. "Look, Chloe, I know things weren't always great between us growing up. I wasn't the best big sister. But I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I want us to have a real relationship. We're adults now," she continued. "We can move past all that childhood stuff, can't we?" Her apparent sincerity caught me off guard. Part of me, the part that had always longed for a family connection, wanted to believe her. The other part, the part that remembered years of manipulation and favoritism, remained skeptical. But when she mentioned that our mother had been asking about me, guilt compelled me to agree to occasional sister dinners. Over the next few weeks, Olivia inserted herself into my life with surprising persistence. She would show up at my lab with coffee, insist on taking me to lunch, and call frequently to chat. During these interactions, her questions increasingly focused on my work. "So, what exactly are you researching again?" she would ask. "Explain it to me like I'm 5. At first, I kept my explanations vague and simplified, but Olivia proved surprisingly adept at drawing out details. She seemed genuinely interested, asking insightful questions that made me think she was truly trying to understand my world. "This stem cell therapy sounds amazing," she gushed during one dinner. "How do you modify the cells exactly? What's your secret sauce?" Looking back, I should have recognized the red flags. Her notebook where she jotted things down when she thought I wasn't looking. the way she would take photos of journal articles left open on my desk. Her sudden interest in meeting my colleagues, but I was blinded by the novelty of having Olivia actually seem interested in my life and achievements. The first concrete warning came from Leo. He stopped by my office one evening, closing the door behind him. "Chloe, I saw your sister having coffee with Jacob Vance yesterday." My blood ran cold. Dr. Jacob Vance was our most direct competitor, heading a similar research program at Massachusetts General Hospital. Our labs had been racing to develop effective therapies using slightly different approaches. "Are you sure it was her?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Leo nodded grimly. "Positive. They seemed pretty friendly. Could be innocent, but it wasn't innocent." 2 days later, I came into the lab to find my research assistant Maya in a panic. A backup drive containing our latest research data was missing, including our proprietary cell modification protocol, the secret sauce that made our therapy uniquely effective. We searched everywhere, but it was gone, without a trace. I immediately suspected Vance, but had no proof of his involvement. Until, that is, the following week, when he published a paper announcing a breakthrough in leukemia treatment using a stem cell modification method virtually identical to the one my team had developed. The Institute launched an internal investigation. Security footage showed no unauthorized personnel entering our lab area. The focus of suspicion turned inward, to someone with legitimate access. Given that I had the most to lose from the data theft, I wasn't seriously considered a suspect. But the investigation created an atmosphere of distrust that poisoned our once collaborative environment. Then came the bombshell. Security footage from the building's main entrance showed Olivia entering one evening using my access card, which I had reported missing and replaced the previous week. She was recorded leaving 2 hours later with a large purse that appeared heavier than when she arrived. When confronted with this evidence, Dr. Peterson looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and disappointment. "Chloe, did you give your sister access to the lab?" "Absolutely not," I insisted. "She must have taken my card without my knowledge." "The board is concerned about your judgment in this matter," he said heavily. "The position we discussed, heading the new research division, they are reconsidering." I felt the floor drop out from under me. Everything I had worked for was slipping away because of Olivia's betrayal. That evening, I went to her hotel, demanding an explanation. When she opened the door, the innocent act dropped immediately. Her smile turned cold, calculating, like a mask being removed. "What did you expect, Chloe? That I would just stand by and watch you become the family success story? The brilliant doctor saving lives, while poor Olivia couldn't even keep a modeling job or a husband?" "You sold my research to Vance," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Those protocols could save lives." She shrugged, unconcerned. "They still will, just with Vance's name on them instead of yours." "He paid very well for them, by the way." "Why?" I demanded. "Why would you do this to me?" Her expression hardened. "Because you always had to be the perfect one, didn't you? The smart one. The special one. Mom and Dad might have favored me with gifts and attention, but they respected you. They were proud of you in a way they never were of me. Who cares about Olivia's fashion shows when Chloe is curing cancer?" Her voice rose in a mocking falsetto. I stared at her, finally seeing the depth of her resentment. I never had anything you wanted, Olivia. You had everything. The love, the support, the attention. All I had was my work. And now you don't even have that. She smiled. A cold, satisfied smile that I would see in my nightmares for months to come. Who's the favorite now? I left her hotel room feeling like I had been hollowed out. Within weeks, the fallout was complete. While I wasn't fired, I was removed from leading my research project and placed under close supervision. My reputation in the scientific community was tarnished by whispers of nepotism and security breaches. The position heading the new division went to a colleague from another department. My carefully constructed world, the identity I had built for myself as a respected researcher, lay in ruins around me. And the worst part was that no one in my family believed Olivia was responsible. When I called my parents to explain what had happened, they dismissed my accusations as jealousy and suggested I seek therapy for my paranoia. Once again, Olivia was believed without question, while I was cast as the troublemaker. Some patterns, it seemed, never changed. The months following Olivia's betrayal were the darkest of my life. I moved through my days like a ghost, going through the motions at work, where I was now supervised like an untrustworthy intern, rather than the accomplished researcher I had been. My colleagues avoided eye contact in the hallways, uncomfortable with the scandal that clung to me like a shadow. Depression settled over me like a heavy blanket. I stopped returning calls, even from Leo, whose unwavering support felt like more than I deserved. I questioned everything about myself, wondering if there was some fundamental flaw in me that made me unworthy of loyalty, even from my own sister. It was Leo who finally broke through my isolation, showing up at my apartment one Saturday morning with coffee and an ultimatum. "You have two choices," he said, setting the coffee on my cluttered table. "You can continue this pity party, which frankly doesn't suit you at all, or you can fight back. Not for your job, not even for your reputation, but for your own peace of mind." "How?" I asked, my voice hoarse from disuse. "No one believes me." "Not the board, not my parents. Everyone thinks I'm either incompetent or paranoid." "Then prove them wrong," he said simply. "You're a researcher, Chloe." "So, research. There's something off about this whole situation with your family. You've mentioned it before. Little things that never added up. Maybe it's time to look deeper." His words struck a chord. All my life, I had felt like an outsider in my own family, and not just because of the favoritism. There were physical differences. Missing baby photos, my grandmother's cryptic comments. What if there was more to the story than I knew? My investigation began with a visit to my grandmother in the Silver Pines nursing home. Advanced Alzheimer's had robbed her of most recent memories, but sometimes the past came through with startling clarity. I found her in the common room, staring out a window at the garden beyond. "Grandma, it's Chloe," I said, taking her fragile hand. She turned to me, her eyes cloudy, but then suddenly focusing. "Chloe, the one with the green eyes." She reached up to touch my curly hair. "Not like the others, are you?" "No, Grandma, I'm not." "Do you remember when I was born?" She frowned, confusion clouding her features. "Born?" "No, not born. Came later. Your mother was so sad after the second one. The doctor said no more, but she wanted another so badly." My heart began to race. The second one? You mean after Olivia? The boy. The little boy who died. Her grip on my hand tightened. 3 days old. Lungs not right. Your mother couldn't bear it. Then you came. Different, but still theirs, they said. Love her the same, they said. Before I could ask more questions, her lucidity faded and she began talking about her own childhood. The conversation I had hoped for was lost in the mists of her deteriorating mind. But she had given me enough, a thread to pull. The next weekend, I drove to my parents' home while they were attending a charity function, using the spare key they didn't know I still had. The basement storage room held decades of family records, organized with my mother's characteristic precision. Birth certificates, insurance policies, medical records, all neatly labeled and filed. I found Olivia's birth certificate easily enough. The original, with my parents' names clearly listed as biological parents. My own file contained only a certified copy of a birth certificate, issued when I was 1 year old. Not the original document. Unusual, but not definitive proof of anything. Then I found the medical records. My mother's obstetrical history showed 3 pregnancies. Olivia, a son named Daniel who died shortly after birth from respiratory distress syndrome. And then, nothing. No record of a pregnancy with me. At the bottom of a box marked Insurance, I found an old envelope from Eastern States Adoption Services containing correspondence about a home study, completed when my parents were in the process of adopting a child. The letters were dated the year before I was born. My hands shook as I carefully returned everything to its place. I wasn't ready to confront my parents yet, not without more information. On my way out of the neighborhood, I impulsively stopped at the home of Mrs. Gable, an elderly neighbor who had lived next door to my family since before I was born. She had always been kind to me, slipping me cookies when Olivia wasn't looking. Mrs. Gable welcomed me with genuine warmth, exclaiming over how grown-up I looked and insisting I stay for tea. As we sat in her cluttered living room, I carefully steered the conversation to the past. I'm working on a family history project, I explained, a half-truth at best. I'm trying to fill in some gaps about when I was very young. Oh, what a lovely idea, she said, pouring tea into delicate cups. Your parents must be so pleased. Actually, they're not really the sentimental type. I was hoping you might remember some things, being our neighbor for so long. For instance, do you remember when I came home from the hospital as a baby? A shadow passed over her face and she set down her teacup with a slight clatter. Chloe, dear, I don't think I should be the one to... Please, Mrs. Gable. I think I already know, but I need to hear it from someone else. She sighed deeply, her kind eyes sad. You were about 6 months old when you arrived. Such a beautiful baby with those remarkable green eyes. Your parents had been devastated after losing little Daniel. The doctors told your mother she couldn't have any more children after that difficult birth. They had just started looking into adoption when they were matched with you, she continued. It happened very quickly, as I recall. Did everyone know that I was adopted? In the beginning, yes. But as you grew older, your parents seemed to mention it less and less. By the time you were in school, I don't think they talked about it at all. I always thought it was strange that they never told you, but it wasn't my place to say anything. And Olivia, did she know? Mrs. Gable hesitated. I don't believe so. She was only 4 when you came. Children that age don't always understand or remember things clearly. I thanked Mrs. Gable for her honesty and left with a strange sense of both betrayal and relief. The puzzle pieces of my childhood were finally fitting together, explaining the subtle but persistent feeling of being different, separate, less than. But I needed irrefutable proof, something that couldn't be explained away or denied. I decided to take a DNA test, ordering a kit online that would compare my genetic makeup to established family groups. The process was simple. A saliva sample mailed to a lab, results available in 4 to 6 weeks. Those weeks of waiting were both agonizing and clarifying. I went through the motions at work, participated in obligatory family dinners where the tension could be cut with a knife, and waited for the scientific confirmation of what I already knew in my heart. When the email finally arrived with my results, I wasn't surprised. There was zero genetic connection between me and the family I had grown up with. I was definitively not biologically related to any of them. The truth I had suspected for months was now confirmed in cold, hard data. What I hadn't expected was how this knowledge would affect me emotionally. Rather than feeling more alienated, I felt strangely liberated. The mystery that had haunted me all my life had a logical explanation. The reason I had never truly fit in wasn't because I was fundamentally unlovable or defective, but because I came from different stock altogether. The question now was, what to do with this information? I hadn't yet decided when fate intervened in the form of a desperate phone call from my mother. The call came on a Tuesday evening as I was reviewing journal articles at my kitchen table, still processing the DNA test results I had received just days earlier. My mother's name flashing on my phone screen was unusual enough to give me pause. We hadn't spoken since our argument about Olivia's role in my professional downfall. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Chloe." My mother's voice sounded strange, tight with emotion. "You need to come to Massachusetts General Hospital right away. It's Olivia. She's very ill." My first thought was that this was some elaborate manipulation, another of Olivia's schemes. "What's wrong with her?" "She has acute myeloid leukemia." The irony wasn't lost on me. The very disease I had been researching treatments for had now struck my sister. "It's aggressive, Chloe. The doctors say she needs a bone marrow transplant as soon as possible." I felt a complex wave of emotions: shock, a shameful flicker of vindication quickly replaced by guilt, and underneath it all, genuine concern. Despite everything, I didn't want Olivia to suffer. "I'll be there in an hour," I said, already reaching for my coat. The oncology floor at Mass General was painfully familiar from my years of research. The antiseptic smell, the hushed voices, the underlying current of fear. All these were the backdrop to my work, but experiencing them as a family member rather than a doctor gave them a new, unsettling dimension. My parents were in the waiting area, my father pacing while my mother sat rigidly in a plastic chair. They both looked older than I remembered, worn down by worry. My mother rose when she saw me, relief evident in her expression. "Thank you for coming," she said, as if surprised that I would show up for my own sister's medical crisis. "The doctor will be here soon to explain everything." Dr. Patel was a petite woman with kind eyes and the direct manner typical of oncologists who have learned that clarity is a kindness when delivering difficult news. She led us to a small consultation room and explained Olivia's condition in detail. "The leukemia is moving aggressively. We've started chemotherapy, but given the specific genetic markers of her cancer, A bone marrow transplant represents her best chance for long-term survival. She looked at each of us in turn. We'll need to test family members for compatibility. Siblings often provide the best match. My parents immediately agreed to be tested, though Dr. Patel gently explained that parents were rarely perfect matches. The best hope is usually a sibling, she said, turning to me with expectation in her eyes. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The irony of the situation was almost too much to bear. I had spent years researching treatments for blood cancers, only to have my sister diagnosed with one. And now I, the sister whose career she had sabotaged, might be her only hope for survival. Olivia's hospital room was dim, the blinds drawn against the afternoon sun. She looked startlingly different from the polished, confident woman who had strode into my lab months earlier. Her once lustrous hair had already begun to thin from the chemotherapy. Her complexion was sallow, and she had lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. Seeing her so diminished shocked me more than I had expected. Her eyes fluttered open as I approached the bed. "Chloe," she whispered, her voice weak. "You came?" "Of course I came," I replied automatically, taking the chair beside her bed. What else could I say? "I need to tell you something," she said, struggling to sit up slightly. "About your research." I did take it. I gave it to Vance. I was jealous, and I wanted to hurt you. Tears filled her eyes. "And now I have the exact disease you were trying to cure. Karma's a bitch, right?" I didn't know how to respond to her confession. Part of me appreciated her honesty, while another part wondered if this was just another manipulation, a deathbed repentance designed to win my sympathy, and more importantly, my bone marrow. "We'll talk about it later," I said finally. "You need to focus on getting better now." The testing process was quick. A simple blood draw to determine compatibility. While we waited for results, the pressure began to mount. My parents took up residence in the hospital, my mother barely leaving Olivia's side. Extended family began to arrive, aunts, uncles, cousins, all rallying around Olivia with food, flowers, and emotional support. Several of them cornered me in the hospital cafeteria one evening. "You'll donate if you're a match, right?" my Aunt Susan asked, as if there could be any question. "Olivia has always looked up to you." This blatant rewriting of our history was staggering, but I simply nodded and escaped to the relative privacy of the hospital garden. There, Leo found me, having come as soon as I texted him about the situation. "You know the results of the DNA test," he said quietly, sitting beside me on a stone bench. "You're not biologically related. The chances of you being a match are the same as any random person on the street." "I know," I said. "But what if I am a match?" "What then?" "Then you have a choice to make," he replied. "And it needs to be your choice, Chloe, not driven by guilt or obligation." The next day, Dr. Patel called my parents and me into the consultation room again. My father and mother were not matches, as expected. Then she turned to me. "Chloe, your results indicate that you are a potential match. Not perfect, but close enough that we believe a transplant could be successful." My mother burst into tears of relief while my father placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Thank God," he said. "When can we schedule the procedure?" "Wait," Dr. Patel held up a hand. Donating bone marrow is a serious procedure. Chloe needs to understand what's involved and make her own decision. She turned to me. We would need to harvest stem cells from your bone marrow, most likely from your pelvic bone. This requires anesthesia and has some risks, though they're relatively minor. Recovery takes about 2 weeks, with some pain and discomfort. But she'll do it, of course, my mother interrupted. It's her sister. I felt a sudden, overwhelming need for space. I need some time to think, I said, standing abruptly. I'll let you know my decision tomorrow. My mother followed me into the hallway, her expression incredulous. What is there to think about? This is Olivia's life we're talking about. I understand that, I said, keeping my voice level. But I need to consider this carefully. Consider what? That you might be too busy to save your sister's life? Her voice rose sharply. After everything this family has done for you. I almost laughed at the absurdity of that statement. What exactly has this family done for me, Mom? Besides lying to me my entire life? She recoiled as if I'd slapped her. What are you talking about? I know I'm adopted, I said, the words feeling strange in my mouth despite having known the truth for weeks now. I know I'm not biologically related to any of you. She paled visibly. Who told you that? No one had to tell me. I figured it out and confirmed it with a DNA test. Were you ever going to tell me the truth? She recovered quickly, her shock morphing into righteous indignation. That doesn't change anything. We raised you. We're your family, and family helps each other. I'll help, I said carefully. I can pay for a national bone marrow registry search. There are thousands of potential donors. One of them might be an even better match than I am. We don't want your money, she snapped. We want you to do what's right. You owe your sister this. I'll give you my answer tomorrow, I repeated, turning away before she could see the tears threatening to spill. That night, I barely slept, turning over all the angles of my impossible situation. If I refused to donate, Olivia might die, and I would bear that burden forever. If I agreed, I would be saving the life of someone who had deliberately tried to destroy mine, reinforcing a lifetime pattern of putting Olivia's needs above my own. By morning, I still hadn't decided. But as I walked into the hospital, I knew the confrontation I had been avoiding for decades could no longer be postponed. It was time for the truth, all of it, to finally come to light. The hospital waiting room had transformed into an impromptu family gathering by the time I arrived. My father stood by the window, his tall frame silhouetted against the morning light, deep in conversation with my Uncle Mark. My mother sat surrounded by her sisters, all of them speaking in hushed tones that immediately ceased when I entered. 2 of my cousins occupied chairs in the corner, scrolling through their phones with the detached interest of people who had been drafted into a family crisis. At the center of it all was Olivia, seated in a wheelchair. The chemotherapy had taken a visible toll. Her skin had a grayish cast, and a colorful scarf covered her thinning hair. Despite her weakened state, she managed to project a vulnerability that drew all eyes and sympathy toward her. My mother rose immediately when she saw me. Chloe, we've been waiting. Have you made your decision? All conversations stopped. Every person in that room turned to look at me, their expressions ranging from expectation to barely concealed judgment. The weight of their collective gaze was suffocating. "I'd like to speak with all of you," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "About the bone marrow donation, and some other matters." My father frowned. "What other matters?" "Olivia doesn't have time for distractions, Chloe. She needs an answer about the transplant." "This is relevant," I insisted, "and it won't take long." Reluctantly, they arranged themselves around the waiting room, a jury assembled to hear my case. Olivia's wheelchair was positioned at the center, the place of honor she had always occupied in our family dynamic. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "I've been thinking about what it means to be family," I began. "About obligations and loyalties, truths and lies." "Chloe," my mother interrupted, "if this is about your adoption, we can discuss that later. Right now, we need to focus on Olivia's health." A murmur ran through the room. Clearly, not everyone had been privy to this particular family secret. "You're adopted?" Olivia asked, her voice weak but her eyes sharp with interest. "Since when?" "Since birth," I replied, meeting her gaze directly. "Something our parents never bothered to tell either of us." My father stepped forward, hands raised placatingly. "This isn't the time or place for this discussion. Olivia is fighting for her life, and you're bringing up ancient history." "It's not ancient history to me," I countered. "It's my life, my identity, and it's directly relevant to the bone marrow donation." "How?" my mother demanded. "How is it relevant?" "You're a match, that's all that matters." "Actually, I'm only a partial match, which is statistically unusual for siblings." Now I understand why. I turned to face the entire family. "I took a DNA test recently. It confirmed what I've suspected for a while now. I'm not biologically related to any of you." The silence that followed was deafening. Olivia's eyes widened, and she looked to our parents for confirmation or denial. My mother recovered first. "The DNA test doesn't change the fact that you're part of this family, Chloe. We raised you. We provided for you. We gave you everything." "Did you?" I asked quietly. "Or did you consistently favor Olivia while treating me like an outsider? Did you ever wonder why I threw myself into academics and moved across the country for college? Why I rarely came home for holidays? Why I built my entire life and identity around achievements that had nothing to do with this family?" "That's not fair," my father protested. "We loved you both equally." "No, you didn't," I said, the words releasing decades of pent-up hurt. "Olivia got the love, the attention, the benefit of the doubt. I got conditional approval when I achieved something you couldn't ignore, and criticism or indifference the rest of the time." "This is ridiculous," my mother snapped. "We're not here to rehash your childhood grievances. We're here because Olivia needs a bone marrow transplant, and you're the only match. That's the bottom line. You owe your sister your bone marrow," she continued, her voice rising to a shout that drew concerned looks from a passing nurse. "It's family." The room fell silent again, all eyes on me. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder containing my DNA test results. "Actually," I said, my voice steady, "she's not my sister." I handed the folder to my father, whose hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Olivia strained forward in her wheelchair, trying to see the documents. "What does it say?" she demanded. "It says Chloe has no genetic relationship to our family," my father answered, his voice hollow. 0% shared DNA with any of us. And you never told me? Olivia turned to our parents, her expression incredulous. All these years, you let me believe she was my biological sister? We wanted you both to feel like real sisters, my mother insisted. The biology doesn't matter. Family is more than DNA. If family is more than DNA, I said, then why did you always treat us so differently? Why was Olivia always the favorite, always believed, always centered, while I was an afterthought? That's not true, my father began. But the protest sounded weak even to his own ears. It is true, I pressed. When Olivia deliberately sabotaged my research project and destroyed my career, you refused to believe me. You suggested I needed therapy for paranoia, even after she just confessed to me that she did it. She did what? My Uncle Mark looked shocked. This particular family drama hadn't made it to the extended family grapevine yet. Olivia had the grace to look ashamed. I did take her research, she admitted quietly. I was jealous. Chloe was finally getting recognition, becoming the successful one. I couldn't stand it. My mother's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. That's between you two. It has nothing to do with this medical situation. It has everything to do with it, I countered. You're asking me to undergo a painful, invasive procedure for someone who deliberately tried to destroy everything I've worked for. Someone who has never shown me the slightest loyalty or kindness. And you're using family as the justification when you've spent my entire life treating me as less than family. Olivia was crying now, silent tears tracking down her pale cheeks. I didn't know you were adopted, she said. They never told me. Would it have made a difference? I asked her directly. Would you have treated me better if you'd known I wasn't your biological sister? She looked away, unable to meet my eyes, which was answer enough. I think it's time for some honesty in this family, I said, gathering my bag. I'm not refusing to help Olivia. I've already contacted the National Bone Marrow Registry and offered to pay for an expanded search. There are thousands of potential donors out there, and one of them might be an even better match than I am. But what if there isn't time? My mother demanded. What if the search takes too long? Then I'll reconsider, I said. But first I want to explore all other options. Options that don't involve me sacrificing for a family that has never sacrificed for me. How can you be so cold? My Aunt Susan interjected. This is Olivia's life we're talking about. Yes, it is, I agreed. The same Olivia who had no concern for my life, my career, my future, when she stole my research. The same Olivia who has been favored and protected by this family, at my expense, for 32 years. I turned to leave, then paused, looking back at the tableau of shocked and angry faces. I'll be in touch about the registry search, but right now, I need some distance from all of you. As I walked out of that waiting room, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. The family I had spent my life trying to please, trying to belong to, had never truly been mine. The revelation was both painful and freeing. For the first time, I was making a choice based solely on what was right for me, not on the approval I had spent a lifetime chasing. 6 months can change everything. The seasons had turned twice since that confrontation in the hospital waiting room. Summer fading to fall, then winter yielding reluctantly to spring. As I sat in a small cafe in Portland, Oregon, watching raindrops trace patterns on the window, I reflected on how completely my life had transformed in that short span of time. After walking away from my family, I had thrown myself into two parallel quests: helping Olivia find a bone marrow donor through the National Registry, and searching for my own biological roots. The first task proved surprisingly straightforward. With the financial resources I provided, the registry expanded its search and identified 3 potential donors within weeks. One of them, a college student from Minnesota, proved to be an excellent match, better than I would have been. The second quest led me here, to this rainy corner of the Pacific Northwest, waiting to meet the woman who had given birth to me 32 years ago. Her name was Sarah Thompson. After hiring a specialist in adoption reunions, I had located her within months. Our first contact was through email, then a tentative phone call, where we both struggled to find words adequate for the moment. Now, after weeks of correspondence, we had agreed to meet in person. The bell above the cafe door jingled, and I knew immediately it was her. The curly auburn hair now streaked with silver. The green eyes, so like my own. The hesitant smile as she scanned the room and found me in the corner. Seeing my biological mother for the first time was like looking at a preview of my own future, both familiar and strange. "Chloe?" she asked, approaching my table. I stood, suddenly unsure of the protocol for this unprecedented moment. Do we shake hands? Hug? Simply nod in recognition of our shared genetics? Sarah solved the dilemma by gently touching my arm, a gesture that acknowledged our connection without presuming too much. "You look so much like my mother," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Those eyes are pure Thompson genetics. Over the next several hours, Sarah filled in the blanks of my origin story. She had been a 19-year-old college student when she became pregnant. The father, a fellow student, had wanted no part of parenthood. With no family support and no financial resources, she had made the wrenching decision to place me for adoption. "I wanted you to have stability, opportunities I couldn't provide," she explained, twisting a napkin between her fingers. "But not a day went by that I didn't think about you. Wonder who you were becoming." We discovered shared traits beyond our physical resemblance. A love of science — Sarah was a high school biology teacher — an analytical approach to problems, even the same habit of tucking our hair behind our left ear when concentrating. Nature had asserted itself despite the absence of nurture. Meeting Sarah was just one part of my healing journey. The other crucial element was therapy, which I had finally begun after years of avoiding it. Dr. Emily Carter helped me process not just the recent revelations, but the lifetime of subtle and not-so-subtle messages that had eroded my sense of self-worth. What your adoptive family did, giving you no knowledge of your origins, was profoundly damaging, she told me during one session. But equally damaging was the pattern of favoritism and dismissal. You internalized the message that you were less valuable, less worthy of love and attention. Gradually, I began to rebuild my sense of identity, separating who I truly was from the person I had constructed to earn approval from my adoptive family. I discovered parts of myself that had been suppressed for years: a dry sense of humor, a love of painting, an ability to set boundaries without guilt. Professionally, my life took an unexpected turn as well. Dr. Evelyn Reed, my mentor from medical school, reached out after hearing about my situation through professional channels. She had recently accepted a position as director of a new hematology research institute in Seattle and offered me a senior research position. "Your work was always brilliant, Chloe," she said during our video call. "What happened at Johnson wasn't your fault, and the scientific community knows it. Vance's so-called breakthrough has failed to produce the results he promised, while your original approach is still considered the most promising avenue." I accepted the position and moved to Seattle, just a few hours' drive from Sarah. The Institute provided resources and autonomy I had never experienced at Johnson, along with colleagues who respected my expertise and valued my contributions. Leo also made the move west, accepting a position in the genetics department. Our friendship had deepened through the family crisis, and in the fresh start of Seattle, it began to evolve into something more. Taking that step from friends to partners was frightening after so many relational disappointments. But Leo's steady presence and unfailing support made the risk seem worthwhile. As for Olivia, the bone marrow transplant had been successful. According to occasional updates from extended family members, she was in remission and recovering well. My parents had reached out several times, their messages oscillating between guilt-ridden apologies and subtle attempts to re-establish the old dynamic. I responded politely but maintained firm boundaries, unwilling to be drawn back into patterns that had caused so much damage. Then, 6 months after our confrontation, I received an unexpected call from my adoptive mother. "Chloe," she began, her voice lacking its usual commanding tone, "I'm calling to apologize. Really apologize, not just say the words." She paused, and I could hear her struggling to maintain composure. "We did you a terrible disservice by not telling you the truth about your adoption. And you were right about how we treated you compared to Olivia. I've been talking to a therapist, trying to understand why we did that." "Why did you?" I asked, genuinely curious. "I think," she hesitated, "I think after we lost Daniel, I was afraid of loving another child that completely. Adopting felt safer somehow. Like, if I kept some emotional distance, it wouldn't hurt as much if something happened to you too. Olivia was already there, already loved. You were new, unknown. But that's no excuse for how we treated you. None at all." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was honest, in a way my mother had never been with me before. We talked for almost an hour, navigating decades of hurt and misunderstanding. By the end, we had agreed to move forward with caution, rebuilding our relationship on new, more honest terms. Similar conversations followed with my father, and eventually with Olivia herself. These discussions were painful, sometimes heated, but ultimately cathartic. We would never be the close-knit family portrayed in holiday movies, but we could perhaps forge connections based on truth rather than pretense. The experience taught me profound lessons about the true meaning of family. Biology creates connections, but love, respect, and honesty are what transform those connections into meaningful relationships. My colleagues at the Research Institute, Leo, Sarah, even Dr. Carter, had shown me more genuine care and support than the people who had raised me. I no longer felt compelled to earn my place in the world through achievement alone. My worth wasn't determined by how useful I could be to others, or how much I could accomplish. I was learning, slowly but surely, that I deserved love and respect simply for being who I was. 1 year after the confrontation at the hospital, I stood at a podium at the National Conference on Adoptee Rights, sharing my story with an audience of fellow adoptees, adoptive parents, and advocacy groups. Looking out at the attentive faces, I concluded my speech with the insight that had finally brought me peace. Family isn't defined by the blood in our veins or the name on our birth certificate. True family is built through love, honesty, and mutual respect. Sometimes we find that family in unexpected places, with people who see us clearly and value us completely. And sometimes, the most important family member we need to reconnect with is ourselves. The authentic self that may have been buried under years of trying to belong where we were never fully accepted. The applause that followed was warm and affirming, but even more meaningful were the conversations afterward with people who had experienced similar journeys. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen and understood. Part of a community where my experience was valued rather than dismissed. As I continue building my new life, I often reflect on the strange twist of fate that led me here. Had Olivia not betrayed me? Had she not fallen ill? Had I not discovered my adoption? I might still be living a half-life, forever seeking approval from people incapable of giving it freely. Sometimes the most painful ruptures create openings for the most profound healing. What about you? Have you ever discovered a truth about yourself or your family that changed everything? Has betrayal ever led you to unexpected growth? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that family is something we can choose and create, not just something we're born into. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember that sometimes the hardest paths lead to the most beautiful destinations.